Good evening, everybody. I'm told that the technical glitches that were taking place have now been alleviated to a certain extent, so we can now move forward with the meeting. So, welcome to the planning meeting from Bolton Borough Council. I'll introduce myself first. I am Councillor Chris Evans. I'm Chair of the Planning, and I'll be chairing this meeting. Now I have to go through the housekeeping, which I have to do. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by one of the 6 emergency exits around the chambers. Please assemble at the far side of the front car park, nearest to the park entrance. Officers will be on hand to assist anyone who needs assistance. Please could you put your phone to silent during the meeting? This is where everybody gets their phone out. Then the meeting is also going to be live on YouTube this evening. Right, members will be speaking by raising their hand. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand. I'm sure you all know that, and use the microphone in front of you. Could I just say to members they're a bit worried technically of the on-off switch, so when you finish speaking, you make certain you switch it off, be helpful. So, and then the members voting will be by raising their hands. So I'll now introduce you to who's present. To my right, and I'll look at them as I say, I've got Ziggy Atherton, Mike Brown, Margaret Glancy, and Marilyn Gordon, councillors, all members of the committee. To my left, I have here Tim Webster, who's my vice chair. Then have Lee Higgins. I then have Elaine Holmes. I then have James Mason, and I then have Alan Thwaites. So that's the team of councillors who are all on the committee. To my left, I have here Clive Tobin, who's my Assistant Director for Governance and Democracy, effectively my legal aid, as it were. And to my right, I have Sarah Legg, who's the Assistant Director for Planning. And then we have the 2 team leaders here today. There's Amy Smith, who'll be presenting the thing, and Louise Newcomb there too. Beside them, we also privileged to have Lydia here, giving us help too. Right, so, and then I should say, just so we can see, the people who've been conferring a lot at the bottom of the table on my left-hand side here are Carol Bailey and Sarah Evans, and the reason they're talking so much is because they're still having issues. Can you not hear me at all? Is this helping? That helps, right? Okay, so we'll get a bit closer. Right. So I've also got Democratic Services, Carol Bailey and Sarah Evans, who are just trying to make certain that things keep going on an even ship, which hasn't happened up till now, but hey, that's where we are. So we'll now start the meeting formally. And the first thing we have to do is apologies for absence. I have an apology from Ian, and I will duly note that Ian Atherton is right in saying, because he was a bit iffy of whether he can make it, but I assume Ziggy he cannot make it for this meeting. Okay, so we have apologies from Ian Atherton. Anything else? Is there anybody else? I can't see anybody else missing. We have to propose this? Yeah, we don't. Right. So that's that. Then after that, the next thing is the minutes, to confirm the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on 9th of July 2026. I know Councillor Lee Higgins will want to address this at that point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Without going into the detail of what I said at that July meeting, because other external matters. Yeah.
And we're going to be
Yep.
closer.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fine. As other external matters had moved on since that date, so I'll have to be careful in what I say. However, I'd like it, my comments for the reason I withdrew from that meeting recorded verbatim, and because as the council has put concerning social media posts, sort of suggests it was something to do with myself, when the concern was a cabinet member had made a comment and had also been on a page which members will know and then it has obviously resulted in various external action on. But I would like my comments that I said at that meeting to be recorded verbatim in the minutes, because it is very important. It's nothing to do with myself. It was relating to a cabinet member making a comment, but equally cabinet members being on a various page which handed out abuse to myself and my family.
Councillor Higgins, of course, we can do it verbatim, so we'll go back to the video and get it verbatim, and that could be added to the minutes, and I don't think anybody will object to that, obviously, because we want it to be recorded exactly as you said it. Councillor Elaine Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I take it then that we won't be able to do any more with the minutes, because obviously if we haven't got everything put in, you can't. Is that right?
Elaine, Councillor Elaine, as long as the committee are happy with this, if you could delegate it to me to make certain, and obviously Sarah here, we will go through the YouTube and guarantee that will be exactly what you said. So as long as you'll take that on, if you'll take that on board, that would be brilliant, because that's anything else would delay it, and I'd rather we approve it and delegate it to me and the Chief Planning Officer to sort that out for you. And I guarantee it will be exactly what they said. Alan.
Thank you. I did issue an email to everybody, and I think there's some copies around. I wanted to make an amendment to the reasons for the application. So I wasn't planning on reading it all out, because I think everybody's seen a copy of it.
Has everybody got a copy of it and they are happy with it? Is there any issues from anybody on the committee? Speak now. But as long as the committee are happy, once again, we'll check through it and make certain it's okay, if that's okay with you. And then obviously it will be proposed. So if I could have a proposer and seconder, unless someone else has anything else to say, no. So a proposer, Siggy, thank you. And a seconder, thank you very much. Yep. Okay, let's go to the vote, please. All those in favour? Thank you. I think that's unanimous. Anybody against or abstain that I've missed? Nope. So that's unanimous. Thank you. The minutes are passed, and I'll sign them accordingly once we've done the edits that are necessary. We'll now move on to number 3, which is declarations of interest. So is there anybody who wishes to declare, any committee member who wishes to declare an interest in this particular item? Yep. I don't like the way you're. Okay, so there's no one, am I right in saying there's no one committee member who's got to declare an interest in this agenda items that are coming up? Nope, thank you. We now move on to the schedule of applications. We have before us only one application, which is the one from 2 Wallace Close, Melton Mowbray. And I will now hand over to Amy Smith, who is our team leader, who will now take us through this application.
Thank you, Chair. Can we have the presentation, please?
Thank you. Over to you now, Amy.
Thank you. Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. So this application is brought to Planning Committee as it has been called in by Councillor Ian Atherton, and it has received 25 public objections which are summarised in the report. There are also objections received by local ward members on the grounds of need and parking. Highways and Environmental Health have been consulted and have confirmed that they have no objections. The summary of consultation responses are set out in the report at paragraph 6.4. The proposed development is considered to comply with policies SS1, C2, IN2 and D1 of the Melton Local Plan. Next slide, please. So this is the site location plan, identifying the two-storey detached dwelling located within the main urban area of Melton Mowbray. The site is bound by residential development to the north, east and west, and an open area of green is to the south. The Melton Learning Hub is located to the southwest of the site, indicated on the map to the right of the screen, within the red circle, on the corner of Burton Road and Baldock's Lane. Next slide, please. It is proposed to change the use of a C3 dwelling to a C2 children's home. It is situated on a private drive off Wallace Close with two other large detached dwellings as shown on the screen. The relevant site is the central dwelling highlighted by the red arrow. The existing property has 5 bedrooms and an integral double garage. There is also off-street parking for 2 vehicles to the front of the dwelling. Just to highlight here, there are no changes proposed to the external appearance of the dwelling, and therefore the proposal accords with policy D1 of the local plan. Members have asked why this application is for a formal change of use. When other children's homes operators have applied for a certificate of lawfulness instead, it is essentially up to the operator as to which approach they take, but often Ofsted prefer formal change of use permission. A certificate of lawfulness is considered on the basis of whether a material change of use is proposed on the evidence submitted. This is a matter of law, fact and degree. Sometimes, even where a change would not be considered material, the operator would prefer to have the use more formally established through a change of use permission to use Class C2. This is covered in more detail in the Council's planning guidance note for children's homes. In this case, the applicant and future operator has told us in their planning statement at paragraph 4.51. Next slide, please. There are no external alterations proposed and no changes to the internal layout, again according with policy D1 of the local plan. The applicant states the home will provide 24-hour care for up to 3 children between the ages of 8 to 17 years old. It is also stated that there would be 2 carers on site at any one time, with staff handovers taking place at 7 AM, and a manager would typically be on site weekdays between 9 AM and 5 PM. Next slide, please. The site plan demonstrates the 2 off-street car parking spaces to be maintained to the front of the dwelling. It has also been stated within the planning statement that the operator could utilise the garage space for an additional parking space if required. This accords with Leicestershire Highways Design Guide, which does require a 5-bed dwelling in the urban area to provide 3 off-street car parking spaces. Also, due to its location within Melton Mowbray, the site is considered to be in a sustainable location to allow future occupiers and staff to have access to local services, facilities and a range of transport modes, including bus routes. To further encourage sustainable travel from the site, a planning condition has been attached to the recommendation for cycle storage to be provided. The proposal therefore satisfies policy D1 and IN2 of the local plan. Next slide, please. An evidence of demonstrated local needs statement, a planning statement and a management plan have been submitted by the applicant as required by the Council's planning guidance note for children's homes. Consideration has also been given to the NPPF, the planning guidance note and the Leicestershire County Council's sufficiency statement, which was recently updated in March 2026. This matter is covered in the report at paragraph 7.2.10 through to 7.2.11. Next slide, please. To summarise the report, the proposed development represents an appropriate and sustainable form of development in Melton Mowbray, being located in a residential area close to existing facilities and services. The use is considered appropriate in a residential area, and the use would not be materially different to that of a typical residential household. Officers consider that the amenity of neighbouring properties would not be significantly harmed by the proposal, and there is sufficient car parking provision. There is therefore no conflict with relevant policies SS1, C2, IN2 or D1 of the local plan. There are no objections from statutory consultees. The officer recommendation is to approve subject to the 4 conditions set out in section 10 of the report, which relate to the standard time condition, the approved plans and supporting documents, the limitation of use as a small-scale children's home only, and for the provision of cycle storage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. Now we get to the stage where committee members, if they wish to, could ask for clarification or any questions on the presentation. Councillor Lee Higgins.
Thank you, Chair. Amy, just because I've read the minister's written ministerial statement, and then you mentioned about planning permissions, and obviously what the statement says as well. Am I right that this doesn't necessarily need planning permission? If the applicant wanted to take a different route, it could have just taken a certificate of lawfulness route. It is only because they have chosen to ask for planning permission and a more formalised structure, that's why it's here. But another legitimate route they could have taken was the certificate of lawfulness route. Is that correct here?
Yes, that is correct.
Well,
Thank you. And I was going to ask a different question, but I'll just follow that one up. Because in the, just for a definition, really, because part of the what you've just said in there is that it's considered the same as a normal household usage, but you don't change your parents every 24 hours, because that was the shift pattern. I think you said that the shift changes every once a day. So that's not the same as a normal household. But I'll just leave that. I'll leave that point there. One of the points I just wanted to raise is the red line on the diagram. It shows the driveway leading up to the house, but that's a shared drive. So shouldn't the red line just be the actual property as a technical point?
So in terms of planning, we expect the red line to encompass any land which would lead from the highway. That's why they've had to include the private drive, because that's not part of the adopted highway.
Okay, I just, yeah, it could be misleading that they've got extra parking on that piece of the road where it's not wide enough to park on that piece of the road. But I'll just leave that. That's it.
I don't think there was, the 2 parking spaces were in the driveway, weren't they? And the garage.
Yeah, as shown on the block plan. I don't know if we can get that plan back up. That shows the 2 parking spaces in front of the garage.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Lane Holmes.
Thank you. When one sells a house, generally it shows great big areas. Like I noticed a great big area of grass on these plans, but there isn't. So I don't quite know how it looks a lot bigger area in front of, if you bring it up again, you can see it's great, sort of a really big area, as though it's somewhere to play and what have you.
Yeah, but that's private land, councillor Holmes.
I know.
So it's not
It
considered
isn't
part
part
of
of
this
it.
application. No,
Exactly.
it can't be.
It
no.
isn't. So I don't want it to be misleading.
Right.
Also,
Carry on.
if I'd just like to say, 2011 to 2036. I was talking to the chair who chaired this from 2011 for the local plan, who chaired it, and she is adamant, I was on that committee as well, that this house and all the houses in that area were only for executive houses and were not to be changed to anything else. Now, we can't find that. I don't know why we can't find it, but it doesn't seem to be around anymore.
Councillor Holmes, could I just?
But I'm only asking.
Is this part of
Yeah,
the
this
local
is what
plan?
I'm asking. If you have looked into it totally, because it doesn't seem to be there, and I don't know.
I would find it
That's all I'm
extraordinary if a
asking.
local plan went into that
Yeah,
detail.
we can't
but
find anything. Yeah,
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to do it? Yeah.
Pass you on to Sarah.
Yeah, that is on. Thank you, Councillor Holmes. So we did go back through the planning history, and the consent for these houses was granted in 2011, subject to quite a number of planning conditions, 19 conditions in total. There is no mention either within the description of the development or in any of the conditions about executive housing.
Okay, Councillor Holmes. Yep. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else who wants to clarification or question of the officer? No? Okay. So we've now moved from that on to the situation where we now go to the public speaking at the planning committee. So we'll now go to the first person who's speaking, which is Julie. So Julie, if you'd like to step up, take your time, tell us when you're ready, and then speak as an objector on this matter. Is it, Julie, have you got a PowerPoint presentation? It says in
Yes.
here.
Yes, it was sent ahead.
Okay. I'll just wait until it comes up, please, Julie. Are you okay? Is this is your presentation presumably, Julie, so you're ready to go?
Yes.
So we've got 3 minutes, not that it's on a clock really, but if you could go for 3 minutes, that would be great. We'll give you a warning when it's time to wind up. Okay, thank you, Julie.
Good evening, everyone. I live at Wallace Close and I'm speaking on behalf of local residents. I want to begin by making one point absolutely clear. Our objection is not to children in care. Every child deserves a safe and supportive home. The issue before you tonight is whether the committee has sufficient evidence to justify approval of this particular site. We submit that it does not. First, the policy assessment is incomplete. The officer's report relies on policy C2, which is primarily a housing policy. The report doesn't explain why a children's home falls within the policy objectives, whether loss of a C3 family dwelling has been properly considered, or whether a children's home is equivalent to the care homes envisaged by the policy when written. These are important planning matters, yet the reasoning is not explained. We believe policy C2 should not be used in support of this application. Second, the report refers to a county-wide shortage of children's placements, but planning permission application is not granted simply because there is a general need. It must be demonstrated that this particular site is suitable, and that assessment has not been made. Planning permission should be based not only on need, but on a thorough assessment of site-specific impacts. We do not believe that assessment has been adequately undertaken. Third, the officer's report underestimates the impact on residential amenity. The officer's report concludes movements associated with carers and social workers would not exceed a typical 5-bedroomed house. That is a planning judgment. There is no evidence supporting it and no comparison made between ordinary family trips and those associated with the children's care home operating 24 hours a day. The proposed C2 use introduces a level of activity and operational intensity that is materially different from the C3 use it would replace. The report simply states it is comparable. That is conclusion rather than analysis. We believe the C2 use will materially alter the character and function of the surrounding area. Fourth, parking and highway impacts have not been fully examined. Residents have repeatedly raised concerns about existing parking issues, yet the report relies heavily on the Highway Authority response and one single site visit. It does not fully reflect or represent the day-to-day conditions. Most importantly, 2 significant site-specific matters have been omitted. The first is the learning hub directly opposite the site. The hub accommodates 32 children daily and has significant activity and traffic movements, yet the report assesses this proposal as though Wallace Close was simply a quiet residential cul-de-sac. It is not. The second is the shared driveway arrangements with 1 and 3 Wallace Close. Increased vehicle movements will have direct impact on neighbouring residents, yet there is no detailed assessment of those implications. Members, this isn't a question of whether children's homes are needed. It is a question of whether you have been given a complete and robust assessment of this site when 2 significant site-specific matters have not been fully assessed and important conclusions have been reached without detailed supporting analysis. We submit the evidence is not sufficient to justify approval.
Julie, thank you.
you.
Perfect timing. Well
Thank
done.
you.
Thank you. Okay, Julie, if you're happy, we now have the times where the councillors on the committee can ask you questions of clarification, etc. As long as you're happy to do that, that would be brilliant. And usually it doesn't take long. Thank you. Anybody from the committee wishes to ask questions of Julie? Councillor Higgins.
Thank you for the presentation. It was just for clarification, because there is, you said policy C2, but obviously there's the use C2 as well. So it's just to be really clear. So policy C2 is the housing mix, and the use of C2 is obviously for children's care home. When you were mentioning about the assessment of C2, were you referring to the housing mix policy or the use of children's care home? Just so I'm clear on that part of your presentation. Thank you, Chair.
So the policy relates to the housing mix, and it is primarily a housing policy. What I was explaining was the report doesn't explain the points that I raised. So why a children's home falls within the policy objectives, whether loss of a C3 family dwelling has been properly considered, or whether a children's home is equivalent to the care homes envisaged by the policy when it was written. Without full explanation on the points I've raised there, the report simply states that the proposal is supported, and that isn't sufficient reasoning.
Thank you, Councillor Higgins. Hi there, Councillor. Yes, another point of clarification.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Julie, for the presentation. We probably need 5 minutes for my slow brain to keep up with the pace. But there was one point you raised, and if I heard you correctly, you referred to issues of parking and repeatedly raising these with the council. Is that because there's an ongoing issue with parking that you've previously raised, or is that simply in association with this application?
So it's in relation to this application. We've repeatedly raised the objections about the parking, but it purely relies on the Highway Authority's response and one site visit in relation to that, where we've provided a PowerPoint of some of the day-to-day realistic operational use of the close, which relates to the overspill and the associated activities at the learning hub on a daily basis.
Okay, thank you very much. Is that okay now? Yep, we'll move on to Councillor Marilyn Gordon, who's put her hand up.
Hi. Yes, what I want to just ask you is when you come off Baldock's Lane and get onto Wallace Close, that area there, does that get a lot of parking there as well when it's busy at that stage?
Are you specifically referring into Wallace Close off Baldock's Lane?
Yes.
So some of the images in the PowerPoint will hopefully demonstrate that. There are more images than what is shown on the screen. But there will be images provided that shows that day-to-day traffic parks all the way down Wallace Close as soon as you come off Baldock's Lane, past the Learning Hub and further down to the bottom end of the close and on the opposite side. And that's vehicular traffic associated with predominantly the activities from the Learning Hub, along with a 16-seater minibus, shoppers and commuters that use Wallace Close, as well as Baldock's Lane when the overspill becomes too great. The curtilage within the Learning Hub cannot accommodate the daily activities and the operational use that it has, which is why Wallace Close has the traffic constraints that are demonstrated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Julie. Thank you, Marilyn. And now over to Councillor Tim Webster.
Thank you, Julie, for your presentation. Clear pictures. Looks very busy. Are these all taken at the same sort of time? Is it a certain time of the day that it's all like this, or just when they're dropping kids off and that sort of thing?
So the day-to-day activities from the operational use from the hub, they have 32 children every day that attend that site, and they're transported to and from the hub in taxis. They have 6 members of staff that also use vehicles, as well as a 16-seater minibus. And then outside of the daily operational hours, there are events that go on through the evenings, there are events that happen at weekends, and outside of term times, the hub provides its premises to schemes like the free school meals. They provide it to MenCap. They hold AGM meetings, and other premises. Other agencies use their premises outside of their daily activities that they run for 32 children.
Really? So just to clarify, it's not just at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. It could be used throughout the day as well.
Those activities are on timetable because often each child will have a visit from either a healthcare professional, an educational professional, or somebody associated with that child's care. And there's 32 children that attend that site, and those visits are unpredictable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webster. Thank you, Julie. Is there anybody else who wishes to? Oh, yep, we've got one more. Councillor Mason.
Just a point, Julie mentioned MenCap as our meetings there. Can I just say that both Councillor Thwaites and myself are board members, trustees of MenCap, but we've never been there, so I don't know whether I mean, I think I'm trying to declare a slight interest in this.
I think you're okay. I think
Okay.
you're safe on that one. Thank you. Okay, let's move on then. Julie, either glad or sad you've finished your time in the table. You may sit down, and we'll now move on to Councillor Pip Allnutt, who's got the next session. Your time, Pip. Tell me when you're ready, please.
Thank you, Chair. I
Thank
fully
you.
understand the genuine concerns and fears of local residents who object to this application. I have circulated a note to committee members of my broader views in accordance with procedure rules, and I support the application because the legitimate concerns of residents have been adequately addressed, in my view, by the planning analysis and by the conditions attached to their recommendation. The house is already a 5-bedroom house and there's no change proposed. If it was in private hands of an ordinary family, it could have many more children than 3, actually, and may I say many more cars, a bit like the programme Butterflies, if you remember that far back. The concerns we all have over over concentration of too many children's homes and too many children do not apply, in my view, to this particular application. Parking and other issues are also susceptible to other measures outside the remit of this committee, and therefore I don't believe that one dwelling should be penalised because of other existing problems on other properties, however good they are. The definition of need has been established, well established, in other applications, and based on planning issues alone, I suggest that refusal now will in fact be overturned at appeal because of the consideration of purely planning applications regulations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Pip. I know you know what the procedure is now, so I'll pass over to the council members, committee members, and ask if they've got any questions on that presentation. Councillor Holmes.
Councillor Arnott, I haven't had anything from you, only because I am not on the internet at the moment. So presumably you put it on, but I haven't seen it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You don't want to read it all out, do you?
No, please. Anybody else? Yes, Councillor
Mason. If we can just, thanks, Councillor Arnott. You mentioned need. Need's a very important thing in this, and we all understand about the need and about children's homes. What is your perception of need as applied to this application?
I think we're on the horns of a dilemma here, Councillor, because as we all know, the county council are behaving like Pontius Pilate. They're washing their hands of it, and by not addressing a particular application. And we are told, although we don't see any documented evidence, that there is an established general need in this county because children are being sent out of county, and also we know that children are coming into county. Goodness knows what it will be when we merge with Rutland, but that's a different story. And we know that historically, at appeal and in the judgment of officers here, need for a whole range of things, including, may I say, solar panels, can embrace not just the town of Melton, but indeed a much wider area. So as we all agree, there is a general need for children's homes, but the specific application to a particular application, we seem to be drawn into this vortex of uncertainty with respect to how we run the process. And I think it needs to be looked at, but not by this committee. It needs to be looked at by the Secretary of State, because it's unsatisfactory. On the one hand, we're told we must obey this edict about national need on all sorts of things, but and put the blinkers on when we come to local need. It's not satisfactory at all.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is another question, Councillor Arnott. So I quite agree that young people have to be looked after. There's no question of that. I don't have any problem with that at all. But so anywhere, would you be agreeable to anywhere then that wants to start up a children's home anywhere in the borough, you wouldn't mind? Or is this just specific to this application?
I'm not certain if the chair will permit to say this really. The principle is that every application must be taken on its merits, and that is sacrosanct. And it is also true that I have objected to other applications where there has been, in the Vale of Belvoir, for example, where there has been an over concentration of the numbers of homes and the numbers of children. And that's why I was very strongly in favour of getting the Secretary of State to provide better a better legal framework in which we can operate. And we're lumbered with this sort of halfway house at the moment. So in principle, we must take every application on its merits. And I just think this particular application, with respect to the concerns of the objectors, is okay, providing we implement the conditions. And also, I think local members should badger the county about parking arrangements, because they've mentioned elsewhere in objections about commuters. So these things can be dealt with, and we must listen to the local residents' genuine concerns and deal with the problem that exists now and will be added to a little bit by this application.
Okay.
Remember, it's only a 5-bedroom house with 3 children.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Is that okay? Yep, Councillor Holmes. Is there anybody else who wishes? No, in which case, yep, you may step down. Thank you. So we now move on to the third speaker, George Waitman, get it right, who's from Astor Planning Consultants Limited and is speaking on behalf in favour of the planning application. Tell me when you're ready, George.
Ready.
Ready? Off you go then, George. Ready?
Committee. Under Section 38(6) of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004, planning applications must be determined in accordance with the Council's adopted development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Paragraph 63 of the National Planning Policy Framework requires that the housing needs of looked after children should be met as part of addressing local housing need. Policy C2 of your adopted development plan supports a mix of dwelling types, tenures, and sizes to meet accommodation needs and to create mixed and balanced communities. Policy C2 is supplemented by your Housing Mix SPD, which explains that the Council is required to meet the needs of groups who require specialist forms of housing. This includes residential children's care homes. Members, looked after children and young people form part and parcel of inclusive communities, and planning policy requires that their housing needs should be addressed by this committee. Like any other child, looked after children require traditional family settings and should have equal access to residential areas. Their accommodation is ideally suited to family neighbourhoods. It was only in February this year that Parliament announced that the number of looked after children has risen nationally over the past decade, with around 44% of placements being outside of local authority boundaries and 22% of places more than 20 miles from home. Leicestershire County Council's latest placement market position statement, as of March 2, 2026, continues to identify demand with limited internal provision, increased demand for emergency placements, increased demand for children with complex needs, and the use of unregulated or activity-based placements. These statistics mean children are being placed away from the areas they know, away from family, friends, schools, and existing support, not because it is appropriate to do so, but because there is nowhere available which is suitable. The County Council has a statutory duty to secure sufficient accommodation within its area to meet the needs of the children it is looking after under the Children's Act 1989. Whilst Melton Borough Council has a statutory duty to determine applications in accordance with the adopted development plan to ensure the housing needs of some of the most vulnerable residents are met. Set against the Council's adopted development plan, there is a clear national, regional, and local need for the proposal. The proposal has been brought forward to meet gaps in provisioning, delivered through a robust assessment by highly experienced and qualified practitioners who work in partnership with the County Council. The existing dwelling is already a 5-bedroom family home and can accommodate a large family. It is important to recognise that occupiers of family houses too can receive care from domiciliary care services without a requirement for planning permission. The proposal does not represent any intensification in use,
George, so
and we respectfully urge you approve this application. Thank you, Chair.
perfect timing again. Thank you, George. Right, and you know the forum now. Marilyn's put her hand up first, so Marilyn.
Yeah, this is to do with the small stretch of road in front of the three houses. Now, I understand that you have got parking arrangements for the people that you think you might need for each session, you know. But what happens during the time when there's the changeover of staff? And sometimes the people will have to park on that small stretch of road and to wait for another car to come out. And then they could be there for about 10 to 20 minutes because if there's any problems, they have to sort of discuss it with the other people, with the other staff members before they go home. But also as well, there's also family members that might want to visit and they're going to be using that small stretch of road. And I'm worried about the houses either side who won't be able to get into their driveways. That's another big worry as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that's an entirely reasonable question and an important question for the neighbours as well. The applicant has submitted a management plan in accordance with your corporate guidance on children's care homes. And within that management plan, it details the shift patterns and most importantly, staff handovers. I think a point I would like to make clear to this committee is for this proposal to work and give the best opportunity to the children it wants to house, it has to be successful within the local area. And it will be the registered manager's responsibility of this children's care home to ensure that staff handovers cause no conflict with neighbours. And with reference to some of the photos put up, there is separate legislation which deals with nuisance parking or illegal parking. And for a reputable Ofsted regulated provider for children's care homes, the registered manager would not accept staff members or visitors parking on that drive. Any visits to this home externally will be pre-arranged through risk assessment plans. Staff handovers will be staggered around a 15-minute interval, and the rota will be a 24-hour rota. And we have to look at the starting point. And the starting point is this is a 5-bedroom dwelling. You know, if that had what we would all consider a traditional family, remembering that these children that will live here do not come from a traditional family or what we would see as a traditional family. But if there was a traditional family there, one staff member would, one adult would leave and go to work, another might take the children to school. Think of all the trips which is possibly being generated. This proposal is, compared to that starting point, no different.
Councillor Ziggy-Atherton.
Thank you very much for that. But at handover, you will have more than 2 cars there. You will have a minimum of 4 cars there. Yes, to have a handover.
Yes.
Mr. Manager, okay?
Yes.
So 2 cars gonna have to park somewhere else and walk across.
Respectfully, I disagree with that, Councillor. So as documented in the management plan, it's staggered around a 15-minute interval. These homes don't operate on a basis where every staff member who's arriving and leaving just does so at the same time. It's arranged in a manner which ensures continuity of care for the children at that selected time, and also to ensure that,
So
as I said, the registered manager will be responsible to ensure it won't cause disruptions to the area.
One coming, one going, one coming, one going, about 4 times. 3 times.
Once in a 24-hour period.
Yeah. Said earlier on that children are taken out of the local area away from families and schools. I've worked in foster care and I've worked in care homes. And as far as I'm aware, and I've got a children's home on my own ward, and there is taxi services every day that they pick up the children to go to their school, which they always have been. So they're normally not moved out of school because you don't know how long you have them in your care. Is that correct?
I can't speak for the children's care home in your ward. All I can speak for is how a children's care home would operate. And like I say, it would all be risk assessment dependent. And if it was a local child to Mountain, the idea here isn't the children are prisoners. It's appropriate amount of age, appropriate autonomy, as documented in the management plan. A child would walk to school if that was possible.
But only if that child would be registered at that school.
Repeat that, sorry, Councillor.
If the child would be registered at that school.
Yes, as I mentioned. So, we can't speak for every possibility, but again, the starting point is this is a family home. And in a traditional family setting, not every child can attend mainstream schooling. There may be alternative arrangements for that school to go elsewhere. This is no different, and the children who would live in this home would be no different.
I have to slightly disagree, having worked in children's home and in foster care. I'm aware that children that are moved into children's home tend to stay within the school setting. They always have, because you don't know how long the child is going to be a resident in your children's home. Correct?
I think there was an application which came to this committee back in February, and as part of that, the county council had provided comments to officers, and there can be incidences, for example, where a child may have to be taken out of their school due to safeguarding measures, due to them being put into care. So I disagree with necessarily that being a hard and fast rule.
Councillor Aston, yeah, I think this will come up, I'm sure, in the debate. So we're now on to Councillor Alan Thwaites has indicated he'd like to speak.
Thanks. Two quick questions. One, just to make absolutely clear what you said a moment ago. Each member of staff will be on duty for the 24-hour period. There'll be no change, that they will be there for the 24 hours, as long as the child's there, obviously.
Yes, and that would be controlled through the management plan, which would form a condition on the consent.
The other one was you were talking about the need and the national need and the general need. In your in the planning statement, you actually quote a figure of 726 children needing homes within the Leicestershire area. Can I ask you where that figure comes from?
Can I just ask where you've quoted that from precisely?
It's from your original planning statement.
Which section of the planning statement?
Have you got the number, Alan?
And I haven't got. I mean,
oh, it's not in the document here then.
It's not in the report.
No,
it was in their original planning document statement, where you were talking about need, and you actually talk about the number of. You got it? Yeah, it's 4.1 demand versus supply.
Is that in the planning statement, sorry, councillor, or
Yes.
the letter of evidence need from the?
It's your planning statement.
For
evidence of
yes, but not the planning statement. Sorry, councillor.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, the statement record.
The document reference.
No worries, unless you want to dispute that figure isn't correct.
Just for due diligence sake. Yes, it's contained.
Yep. I think I've read that figure too, Alan.
Sorry, but it was where that figure actually came from. Was that from Leicestershire County?
I think if you look towards the start of the document, I think it makes reference to all the quotes within that document being evidence within emails between the operator and the county council.
Thanks, that's fine. Thank you.
And we will look that up and just check, but I think I saw it in their March 26 report, which is their latest update. Hello there, Councillor Mason.
Just a point of clarity, really. We've all heard, and particularly from the officer tonight, that the proposed children's care will provide 24-hour care for up to 3 children between the ages of 8 and 17. That's the broad principle of the place, and that also appears in the conditions, although the age group doesn't appear in the conditions. Within the planning statement at 4.51, you say that the applicant, because I assume that Astles wrote this paragraph, the applicant has applied for a C2 use based on the age of future occupiers and non-resident carers. Now, given that the at 17, when at 18 they are no longer children, I can only assume that on that statement that the age of the children may be below 8. Is that right? Or
in section 4.51.
That's right. Yeah. What I'm seeking to establish for myself, for my own mind, is that am I approving a children's home from 8 to 17 years old with 2 carers at any one time, or will you be looking to change the tenure and the management style of the premises at a later date, and that's why we've gone for C2.
In what sense, the age of occupiers, councillor?
in the sense of what the planning statement says. It's your planning statement, not mine. That what it said is that it's based on the age of future occupiers and non-resident care. That is why you've gone for C2.
Yeah, so just with reference to why we've submitted a planning application rather than a certificate of lawfulness, because I know that was touched upon earlier. Every local authority and even the planning inspectorate seems to take a different approach on this application by application. And the best approach for an operator, in our professional opinion, is to submit a planning application and allow it to be decided by the local authority based on planning merits. With reference to sort of the operator model, like I say, it's as it's documented in the submitted management plan, which would form a condition in terms of staff and the age and number of occupiers.
So what you're saying there is you're not, in the future, you're not looking to change the age profile of the residents.
The legal officer may correct me if I'm wrong, but the condition couldn't control the age of the occupiers anyway.
Well, it doesn't. It doesn't. The condition says this hereby approved shall limit a small care home for up to 3 children and their carers.
Yeah, Councillor Mason, what we have to consider is what is in front of us, what not come
Chair,
later. I know where you're coming from.
Would you allow me to exercise my point? Thank you.
Yeah, but just be aware we're considering what's in front of us, what not. We can't consider what may be a future change of use.
You're absolutely right, Chair, and that's why I'm considering the narrative of the reports and the planning statement. So all I want to be clear on is that statement is slightly incorrect within your planning statement. It must be, otherwise it's either one or the other.
I apologise, Councillor. I'm slightly confused by the question. Sort of the thread you're trying to make.
I think the point I'm trying to make is that you've put in your planning statement that you've gone for C2 because it's based on the age and because of the age of future occupiers and non-residential care, which means to me that you've gone for C2 because you may change that in the future.
No, I understand now, Councillor. I do apologise for not understanding what you're trying to get at. So I think if you turn to the other matters section of the planning statement, we reference 2 key pieces of case law, which it sort of decides really between the whole certificate of lawfulness and planning application route, which is a typical problem for operators. So you have the North Devon case, which identifies that where the carers are non-residents, i.e. they come and go from the site, the children and the carers can't form a single household, okay? That was sort of a fundamental piece of case law with regard to these uses. So that specific reference you're making to the planning statement now is in reference to that point within that piece of case law, that this application is being made on the basis of the children and their age and the fact that the staff are non-residents in relation to the North Devon case.
Okay, Councillor Mason, does
people in this room will be well aware. I'm very aware of the North Devon case and the case law that follows that too. But what it is, I'll accept that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Thank you, George. Is there any other? Yes, Councillor Marilyn.
Yeah, it's on page 21 of our report, and it's 7.45, 425, I should say. And it's the last sentence. It's got the proposed introduction of CCTV cameras would not have a detrimental impact on the privacy of neighbouring properties in this instance. But surely CCTV cameras would intrude somewhat on neighbouring properties and would impede on their privacy. You cannot guarantee that the CCTV camera would just record number 2 Wallace Close and some of the surrounding area, and not include some of the 2 neighbouring properties, especially when family and visitors visit these properties. So I'm a little bit worried about their privacy.
Councillor Gordon, just hold on a second, George. This is as such not a planning matter. CCTV coverage and using it even, you know, is covered by law. And it's quite clear that you cannot have a CCTV that's pointing or takes anything of a neighbouring property, because you can be convicted for doing that because of privacy and all the rest of it. The laws are very specific about that, and I'm sure this applicant will do it, but it's not a planning matter. But I'm sure that I'm sure they know legally that they cannot intrude and start supervising or watching people coming and going on the shared drive. That would be unacceptable, and it is not a part of planning law. It's part of the law regards that. So not for here.
Yeah,
Not
I thought
for here.
it'd be more like an accident, not necessarily
Yeah,
wanting
but
to do it.
if you're
you know,
seeking
but-
assurance from George, then by all means, but I'm sure he would give you that assurance.
Yeah, if I may, Chair. Sorry, Councillor. So if I may, so the management plan makes reference to sort of like Ring doorbells, sort of like the Amazon type cameras. But in addition to that, if it was comfort to members, I'm sure the operator would be more than happy that you could condition CCTV and we could submit a plan showing the location and the angle, point of view, etc.
Thank you, Marilyn. Councillor Lee Higgins is next.
Thank you. Obviously, in some of the correspondence from residents, and this is obviously an organisation, limited company. Obviously, we're trying to build healthy communities, which children's care homes are part of healthy communities, as you stated. But equally, there's residentials that they sit in as well. Probably not just for this committee, but with the public who are here as well, and whether this may be able to be a condition. So I'm just pricking the officer's attention when we go to debate of what interaction will you have if you're successful with planning permission. What interaction will you have with the residents? So how would they engage with the lead person on site if there was any particular issues? If any one of the future residents posed a particular concern, and how that's managed. And equally, I know you're obviously Ofsted regulated and things like that, but how can the residents work with you, and how can you work with the residents, give various assurances? Because over time, and it could be any household, there can be an issue, a neighbourly issue, neighbour dispute, and that can happen anyway. It doesn't have to be care homes. But how can you, as a organisation and a regulated organisation, work with your immediate neighbours and the community that you're proposing to sit in, and whether it can be a condition that the applicant has to provide any engagement with neighbours, like I'm thinking like with LCC transport packs type thing, but something is similar to that. If that's allowed, I think that might be a helpful
I'll ask
condition.
you to answer first, George.
So having worked with this operator quite a lot, how it typically would work is the registered manager's contact information would be provided to the immediate neighbours. Now, let's say if there was a specific sort of concern or issue, like I say, you could contact the registered manager directly. Any contact with neighbours, given the nature of the use, would be fully recorded by the home. Every children's care home has an independent individual who inspects the home, Regulation 44 visits. As part of those visits, they will review those records of interactions with neighbours. Now, that's like a safeguard, if you like. So if the home and the registered manager isn't resolving issues and they're continuing to be logged, it would be picked up as part of that meeting. Now, like I say, the home wants to be part of the community. We're not going to deliberately block drives. They're not going to illegally park or nuisance park. That's not going to happen. And I'd like to think over time, you wouldn't notice it necessarily being there, and you'd get to know the individuals and you'd get to know the residents, and you'd have that direct point of contact with a senior member of staff who could hopefully remedy any issues. But like any home, if the children home needed some work being undertaken to it, the registered manager would want to inform the neighbour if there was an instance. Very similar.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Lee. Else who has any questions for George? Oh, yes, Councillor Rain Holmes.
Thank you. You did say that the manager of the home would be there from 9 to 5 So will there be an assistant manager? I mean, if this is passed, because I have concerns. I know where there's another one quite close to Melton. And there was a very dangerous thing happened on the 607. I was driving by. These were very young people trying to get a young man back into his home. And so how senior will there be? Perhaps you can't answer that. It is a concern for them. I do deal with young people a lot. And it concerns me that at this time, and I'm asking you, I know probably it's not quite a planning matter, but it is so important that we know that they are being looked after. Thank you.
George, do you want to answer that?
Yeah,
I
I don't mind answering. I know it's not necessarily a planning material consideration, and I appreciate, you know, committees like this find it difficult because you're putting a lot of faith into different sort of regulators in legislation. You touched on an important point: registered manager. Would there be a deputy? There would be a deputy, and the reason why a registered manager is not on site all the time is because they may be dealing with other homes within the area to which they're registered, and then the home would also have a dedicated deputy manager. Like we say, staffing would be dealt with by Ofsted, placement would be dealt with by the placement authority. A placement would only ever be made if A, you know, the home could meet the needs of the child, B, if the staff had the suitable, you know, ability and qualifications to deal with that child. So that's how I'd answer that question, Councillor. I hope that provides you
very much, George. I think we've given George a fairly lengthy debate. Is there anything else? Nope. Thank you very much, George, for your time. Okay, and we now move on to the last speaker, which is Councillor Sharon Butcher, who I believe will be speaking also on behalf of Councillor Ian Atherton, who couldn't attend today. Tell me when you're ready, Sharon. No, we understand that. We'll give a latitude to that. So take your time and tell me when you're ready, Sharon.
Thank you. Paragraph 6.3 of the MPPF discusses the establishment of the need of the associated note states. Evidence of need for the looked after children can be found in the relevant local authorities' children's social care sufficiency strategy. The relevant LCC documents is LCC Children's Social Care Placement Market Position and Sufficiency Statement 24/27, and its subsequent amendments has no demonstrated local need. Indeed, the document shows that the county has a low number of children requiring such accommodation. In addition, there is no policy with the Melton local plan for the build of new care homes or for the change of use existing buildings to create them. The officer report quotes several policies in the local plan as being relevant, but I believe that none of them are. My justifications being policy SS1, presumption in favour of sustainable development. This policy states that where there are no policies relevant to the application, the council will grant permission unless any adverse impacts of granting permission would significantly outweigh the benefits, which this application clearly does. In my opinion, therefore, the application fails to meet the requirements of the policy SS1. Policy C2, housing mix. The policy is not relevant as it is about the housing mix in the terms of affordability and the number of bedrooms of new builds, not in relation to the change of use. While it does briefly discuss care homes and the support for them, the trust of that support is in the context of new builds and access under building regs to 2015 part M4(2) or the subsequent revisions. Even if we accept this policy is relevant, there is no mention in the application or the officer's report to access for any children who may be disabled. In my opinion, the application is not compliant with the policy. Policy D1, raising the standard of design policy. The policy relates to new developments, which is not making the policy irrelevant to this application. IN2, transport, accessibility and parking. Despite assurance from the LCC Highways, this application is direct contravention of the policy IN2, Part 4 and 6, with the remainder of the policy IN2 not being relevant. As those that live on Wallace Close will show, you have stated in their objections, Wallace Close is already suffering due to the demands in parking from the Melton Learning Hub, which doesn't allow parking or movement of vehicles on site due to safety concerns. I can confirm this because I work there. The results in the vehicles parking on Wallace Close and Baldock's Lane. The property in question has 2 parking spaces assigned which are clearly insufficient for the needs of the staff and others listed in the various papers. Let me remind you that the access of the building is on a private drive, not a public road. You might think you can park on Baldock Lane, and indeed they could, but for those that live on the estate are all familiar with Baldock's Lane is already used as a car park for the Learning Hub and for others who visit Melton or go to work, shopping, etc., or even to catch the train rather than pay to park. The application will only make matters worse, and it demonstrates that LCC Highways comments are fundamentally flawed, resulting in section 7.5 of the report being fundamentally flawed. I'd also like to point out a few things relating to the report. Paragraph 7.2.11 is fundamentally wrong, as the applicant was successful in tendering against an LCC requirement to provide children's homes and associated services. However, that exercise demonstrated no local need and no upper capacity limit. Paragraph 7.3.1 of the report is irrelevant as it is not a new development. Paragraph 7.3.3 of the report state the proposal relates to use of an existing dwelling house and does not involve any significant external alterations that would materially alter its residential appearance, but as far as I can tell, there is no alterations proposed. I myself personally see the benefit of children's homes, but in the right settings. Going back to the parking, Astill stated that these would be vulnerable children, which could also result in a crisis team, social services and police attending the property, so therefore more parking.
Thank you very much for your time, Councillor Sharon Butcher. Right, over to committee. Oh, no, hold on. I'm afraid, Sharon, they might want to ask you a question or two. Sorry, good try. Is that okay? Ziggy Atherton, Councillor Sig.
You just stated you were at the Learning Hub and how parking is affecting not just the residents, but also the people that work at the Learning Hub. How does it affect?
I pick up and drop off children there, and the road is overused for parking. Often cars pull at the side of each other, or they reverse onto the private drive. You can't get down to the bottom of the cul-de-sac to turn around. It's all sorts of sizes of vehicles. I drive a 9-seater. So as well as the minibus, there is all types of vehicles driving there.
Thank you. Oh, carry on, yes.
How safe is it then when you pick up and drop off children with so many other vehicles around and that much coming and going?
It's a case of being a good driver and using common sense. But I wouldn't say personally you need any more vehicles on the road.
Thank you. Right. Anybody else wish to speak? Nope. Okay. Thank you very much. You may now leave the table. Thank you. Okay. So that we've now entered the stage where everybody who was wishing to speak has spoken. And so we now move into the situation where we move into debate on the subject, and councillors can debate the matter before them. Obviously, the proposal from the officers is that there is no reason for it to be rejected. If there's anybody who feels there is, then I think now would be the good time to actually speak up and start to debate the key subjects, which obviously are weighing the material benefit of having a children's home for vulnerable children against the impact that development would have. It's a question of weighing those two things up. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start, I want to make it absolutely clear. I support children's homes, and especially children's homes of this type, because to allow children that have gone through a lot of trauma to be brought up in something close to a home environment is vitally important. And that's entirely consistent with the ministerial statement, which is really our biggest guideline for when we're looking at these. Which recognises the importance of providing a home environment in which they can thrive. But it then goes on to add that wherever possible, enabling them to remain close to their own communities, schools, families, support networks, etc. That means the location of the children's home is not simply a commercial matter. It's a question of meeting the local need. That we've got enough places for those children to have a place near to the place where that's possible, because obviously it's not always possible. So that need, unfortunately, as we've talked about, the County Council doesn't give us any real guidance on this at all. But if I take what the applicant has actually provided, which is saying that, well, they believe there's a need for at least 700 or 750, 726, it was the number that's been quoted, but I'm sure that grows on a daily basis. That's how many children's home places are needed across the county. Now, not all of those are going to be residential homes like this that needs it. So taking that as a starting point, if I take that and try and extrapolate that out, that there's 734,000 people in Leicestershire, 53,000 people in Melton Borough, which is 8%. So that's something like 58 places are needed within Melton Borough. So, and there's give and take. Some are inside into the county, some are outside the county. So that's, let's say 60 places are needed in the county. And like I said, not all of those are necessarily for residential need. So wanting to understand where we stood, the research I did was basically to look at the planning applications that have gone through for children's homes. And you might be as surprised as I was to find out that this is the 19th application for a children's home, 18 of which have been approved. Mostly, well, half of them are certificates of lawfulness. Half of them have gone through planning applications. 2 or 3 of those have come before this committee. So if you take that, those only the new ones. I don't know what was existing before because I can't really find that out. But that is saying 2 to 3 children per each application. That's somewhere between 40 and 50 places that this borough has actually approved in the last 3.5 years. And we're talking about a need of 58 places. So that makes, in my view, the issue of local need a significant planning consideration. It also raises the wider concern around the half of those homes that have been put forward by certificates of lawfulness, and whether they've had the same sort of consideration that this application has been going through, because I don't believe they have. Whilst the certificate of lawfulness is a different legal purpose from a planning application, the cumulative effect is that it's a significant proportion of the number of places that we need to provide. So the principle, in my view, ensuring that the right development is provided in the right place is one of the fundamental purposes of the planning team and the planning system, rather. And children's homes shouldn't be any exemption to that. My point is not that we shouldn't resist children's homes, quite the opposite. We should then support them where they are needed and where they're in the right locations. However, I do believe that as a planning authority, we should give far greater weight to the evidence of local need, because it's been mentioned many times before, but it's always been pushed back. But I do think it's got to be taken into consideration, especially when we're taking local applications like this. So with all that in mind, I think we should consider this application in that wider context. We need to ask ourselves whether we have enough information before us to actually properly assess that.
Okay.
And it's been mentioned before.
Yep. But I just obviously you've had the briefing notes, and we had this in the briefing beforehand. And I did a lot of research like you. Although the ministers have made it very clear that local is a need as guidance, unfortunately in planning law, we have not a leg to stand on to say the word local as needed in a children's home. I'm just telling the committee that is what the people I've spoken to and done my research with. If we just say we reject this on local need alone, then we will be, I would say, that would be significant error to do that. That doesn't mean you can't do it. I'm just saying the guidance I have, the officers, I'm sure Sarah will back me up on this, have done a lot of research on this. And as you know, Alan, the need for these establishments, I haven't got a crystal ball, but it's gone up about 30 to 40% in Leicestershire in the last 3 years, so 10% a year. So no one, including George, I think, can predict what the need will be next month. We don't know it. We can't predict that. So, and we can't predict whether it's in Melton or not. It's just not possible. So legally, you're on very thin ground if you just focus on the local side. I would say if you go for if you're on the parking side, that's a totally different, and the safety aspect, that's a totally, but I can only advise committee members, and I'll pass you over to Sarah at the moment, if we just go on that one alone, we're on thin ice. Sorry, but that's the truth. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on the issue with regards to need. So that figure that's quoted in the March 2026 update, that is a need that is now, whereas approvals in the past, those places are already taken, essentially. So that need has gone. So that need still remains, where you're talking about your calculations, etc. I just wanted to make that point. Thank you, Chair.
Can you just confirm? Sorry. Just confirm also, we've discussed this at length, that also the local issue, i.e. the clients or residents coming from local area, Leicestershire or whatever, is something we cannot say, and you cannot say as an officer, is something that would uphold it being rejected.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the adopted plan doesn't contain any specific policies relating to conditioning of geographical areas, etc. So and assessing that appropriate level of children's home provision across the borough. So whilst the written ministerial statements, the sufficiency statements, and there was also shared a letter from the minister to Ofsted as well, in terms of looking into that geographical location, that our advice remains that they don't provide sufficient planning justification for a condition requiring residents of the children's homes to have some kind of local connection to Leicestershire or any other geographical restriction that members may wish to consider.
Thank you, Sarah.
Excuse me, Chair. So I'm going to have to leave the chamber shortly.
Yeah, very short.
So I appreciate that means I won't be able to take part in the vote, but I will be returning. Apologies.
Thank you very much. Councillor James Mason.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just say, I echo Councillor Thwaite's comments on children's homes. They're needed. We need them. The children need them more than we do, and that's where and that's my starting point. However, with regard to need and local need, although we talk about, and Councillor Thwaite's talked about it, the 726 children, and that's the page of the book. Obviously, people have seen that. That comes from the sufficiency statement. And at page 60 in the sufficiency statement, and that is, and they have to produce that within the Children's Act 1989. That's what it says in the blurb. And it does say, and it's for children or young people under their care who cannot live at home under circumstances, etc., etc., etc. And it's there to and the best interest to be accommodated within the local area in order to stay at the same school or near to other family. Now, the whole of the application, as I read it, is predicated on a local need, because that's what the application says. So I've judged it on local need. If it was a general need, then the applicant would have said it's a general need. It's a local need. But let's look at the metrics. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen and fellow councillors, but you'll have to suffer it. Once again, we do go in to say that 726 children in Leicestershire, and that's what it says. That's no problem. And then it goes down to break it up into how that comes about. Because in the absence of any comment or anything from Leicestershire County Council, which I find appalling, quite frankly, and I'm quite prepared to go on record as saying it on this subject, that it goes down to break it into some constituent parts, although they're not fine parts. The 52% looked after under full care order. Well, I know what a full care order is. I've looked it up, but it goes through it, and then it says in the centre, 10% placed in residential home or school. So it seems to me that 10% of the 726, that's 72 places. That's what it says. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that's the breadth of it. Now, I don't take that on trust, as you'll no doubt know by now. So on the basis that I think the way they've worked this out through the demographics, I've worked it out myself, because I needed to have some measure of what it's about. Now, people need to take a notice of this. I've got no problem with that. But as far as I'm concerned, when I work it through, that if we looked at the borough as a whole, you need 6 places. That's the way I looked it out, because that is the way the demographic works. And I've analysed it by borough, across the piece, and it seems to me that taking into account the local need element, that I'm not against the children's home. What I'm against is I've got insufficient information to judge it. And that must come from Leicestershire County Council, Children's Services.
I'll bring in our legal person here, Clive. I think wishes to address this.
Chair, what policy are you basing need on? Because this is made clear in the advice note that's given to members. We haven't got a policy that determines need in this area. You're taking a ministerial statement and some figures that have been provided and doing your own analysis, but we haven't got a policy framework to put those into.
Thank you. Can I just come back to that?
Briefly, please.
I appreciate that. I know there's no policy. However, the application is based on local need. That's what it says, and I've judged the application on that. And therefore, I believe, having judged it on that, I need to understand what the local need is. And if I haven't got a policy, all well and good. But I must judge it on the local need, because that's what the application says. And also, I think there's enough weight of evidence in the Chief Planning Officer's statement, in the ministerial statement, because this is, again, it is referred to in the application and in the officer's report. So I take that as being the weight. And as far as I'm concerned, I can't base my judgment because I've not got sufficient information.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's your view. Is there anybody else who wants to speak on the debate? Oh, Councillor Elaine Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are several things here. One, I understand the planning officer said there were many conditions. Perhaps we ought to know those conditions about this property. And also, it said it's a private road. Do I take it that it is unadopted? Because if it is a private road, then it comes under it's very different if it's a private road. If all these properties are private, it is very different in law. So I would like to know the conditions, all these conditions, because there are a lot apparently. maybe the condition that I know was put in but somehow disappeared, isn't there, but there are other conditions. And if it is a private road, I would like to know. And something else that, from my fellow councillor here,
Hold on a second.
someone,
Holmes, can we just address that point about the private road? Because I'm sure that Clive's going to have a view on this. I think carry on with your debate and we'll deal with it when you've finished, okay?
I wasn't going to mention this until councillor my side mentioned about the need, but it seems very woolly that where this need is in as far as Leicestershire concerned. These children might come from other places. I am very much in favour of having children looked after. Now, in fellow councillor's ward, there is a retired JP who has been talking to me and said that when she was last a JP, there was a child that kept coming in front of her.
I think.
And let me just finish this because it's important. And this child kept coming. She actually came because she had been put into a rural area, and she came from a city,
I'm going to have to
and
stop
that's why
you
she
there
was being
because
difficult.
the debate about the residents and who they are and where they've come from is not a planning matter. So let's be clear about that. You can't go into particular details about that. The fact is a private road. Almost certainly this dwelling will have attached to it, otherwise the previous residents wouldn't be able to get to their dwelling. Will have permissions to go over that private road to access that building. Otherwise, that's not a planning matter anyhow. So once again, we'll move on from that, Elaine, if you're please, because that is not a planning matter. The private road, if it's just like the covenant or deeds of the building, it's something we'll deal with, that can be dealt with elsewhere, but not as a planning matter. So if we can move on now, please, Councillor Maren Gordon.
So we're not having the conditions. We don't know the conditions. All those
Condition on a private road.
I think also as well with the parking, it's horrendous. And I think for the safety of the children, because they will be allowed out on their own, the younger ones, I mean, they will be allowed on their out on their own, and they will be going in between parked cars. And that is very, very dangerous. So I think the parking is essential that's put down. And also as well, along Baldock's Lane, it's not too far from where Wallace Close is. There is a part that you can get down, and it's pet foods. It's part of pet foods area. And when you go down this part, there's a wide open area where children will want to play, and they'll find it. They will want to play in there. But further down, there is a bridge, and there's some homeless people staying there, which is okay. You know, homeless people have got to stay somewhere. But the fact is, there will be a lot of waste, and you can think about, you know, what they do and drink and everything. So there's that to think as well, because children do explore and they will go down there.
Well, sorry to interrupt, Councillor Gordon. What we can't do, for obvious reasons, is go into that area. That is not a part of a planning condition. We can't ask the applicant to restrict their movements or anything like that. It's not part of planning. What planning is about, you're right, parking is an important part of that. And arguably the need within the area could be debated because the minister's debating it, but we can't go to where, like the green space in front of the building, they might well go and play on that. We can't debate that bit because that's, you know, another matter. So I can move on. If I could move on, I'll come back to you in a second. Councillor Ziggy Atherton.
We talk about policy D1, which is really looks at new developments. This is not new development. Why is it in there?
Pass you on to Sarah. Yeah, D1.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So policy D1 is relevant because it doesn't just deal with the design of development. That might be what it is headed as. I'm just making my way to the actual policy in the document. Bear with me 2 seconds. But it deals also with adequate parking spaces, and I'm just trying to bring the exact wording of the policy up. So it is
Okay, Siggy, I just need to ask you a question because the solicitors asked me to ask the question. You were passed a piece of paper. Oh, it's what she read out. All right, okay, that's fine. Okay, now that's more than adequately covers it. Yep, thank you. Yep, that's fine. Microphone.
As a general principle, we shouldn't be accepting things being handed up if it was made clear what was going on at the time. But obviously, it's not a good look for a person who's spoken on an application to get up and hand a member of the committee will make a decision, a document without us knowing what's going on.
The past, I couldn't remember which one it was. That's what I wanted to check it.
Siggy, you're adequately covered to me as a chair and Clive, so let's move on from there. Right, who else wants to speak? Just hold on a second. We'll just take Marilyn first. Thank you.
Yeah, I propose to refuse this on the basis of the parking, because it's so dangerous for children. So so I'd like to propose to refuse.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. That's within your rights. Is there a seconder for your proposal, Marilyn? Because obviously we need to know if there's a seconder for refusal on the grounds of parking. That's a no at the moment, Marilyn, I'm afraid. So we move on from there, and I think Sarah just wants to come back on D1.
Thank you, Chair. I was just getting the details of the policy up on the screen. So policy D1 is referred to in the report, not just because it is the policy for raising the standard of design, because as you'll note from the report and the presentation that there's no external changes proposed to the property and there's no internal changes proposed. But if you refer to part K of policy D1, it requires that applications make adequate provision for car parking.
So we've had that covered too. Right, as your chair, I need to see where this is now going with.
Yes, I'd like to propose a deferment, Chair. I'd like to propose a deferment on the basis that I don't believe that the a sufficient statement and the statement of need as presented by the applicant sufficiently covers the local need. And I think I've explained what the local need, I believe, why it is materially applicable. That I like until such times as we get more information from Leicestershire County Council on what is the need, not only within Melton but across the borough, so we can help each other across the borough. I'm more than happy to do that, but I do believe we need a deferment so we get more information. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just say, and you're more than entitled to do that. I know that the officers asked for more information from Leicester County Council, and they said on a case by planning application or a planning application, they would not comment.
Just come back to that one. I'm not. So I believe we need a statement from them on the current need across the borough, including this borough, not just associated with this application.
No, so have we got a seconder for deferment? So Councillor Elaine Holmes has seconded that. Right. Is there any go straight to the vote on a deferment. Oh, Clive.
Chair, I think it'd be helpful that if you're going to defer to seek that information, what is the purpose of doing that and what is the idea behind that in terms of a policy framework to which we can apply that?
You've been asked a question, so of course you'll reply.
Thank you. The reason for it is quite simple. That within the application, the whole application is based on a local need, and we need to establish what that local need is. The policy has already been established, I believe, through the ministerial statements and through the chief planning officer statement, and the purpose of the sufficiency statement that's given by the local authority under the Children's Act. I believe that establishes it, and that's why we need better information based on that based on those principles.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Mason. So is there anybody who's willing to second? Oh, I know, Clark. You can come back in a second. Let's just see if we've got a seconder first, because you were willing to do.
I'm quite happy to second, and that's
Okay.
why I made this little statement, because I do care about young people, and I do feel that we want to get it absolutely right. And if we
Okay.
haven't got it quite right, then let's defer it. Thank you.
Wanted to come back again.
Chair, in the absence of a policy in our local plan that says there is a need to prove, that the applicant must prove need, there is no basis on which we can reject it on the basis of need. Just because the applicant's put those words in the application doesn't create a policy requirement to do so. So members cannot take the wording of the application, determine that it must that it is defeating itself because they've looked at some figures which they don't believe adds up. We don't have a policy basis which we can refuse that on. So I can't see the point in going through this process.
Yep. Can I just say, obviously, you're a committee. I'm the chair. It's for the committee to determine. It's up to you. Well, I've already made it very clear that I think local need is not a policy that we can forward, but that doesn't stop you from deciding to defer it because you feel you haven't sufficient information. That's your decision, not mine. And if we want to put it to the vote, then we just put it to the vote. But you've had the officer's opinion on this local need, and you've had the legal thing, so it's up to us now to go to the vote. Unless anybody else wants to speak, let's put it to the vote. So the proposal is, do you want to say it again, James? If you just say it so that people know exactly what the reasons why you want to do.
The reason is that I believe the committee hasn't the information to make a decision on the need of this application, and we need the advice from the Leicestershire County Council on the need for this application, because that's what it says in the ministerial letter, the Chief Planning Officer's letter, and also the sufficiency statement of the local authority themselves.
Nope, that's fine. You've read it.
Can I just say, in answer, then, if that is the case, then and this council has no policy on it, then this whole thing becomes moribund, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Let's just go for what you've gone for, Jeff, not confuse the situation. So, do you want to speak, Marilyn? Yes, sir.
Yeah, could we also add something to do with them to look at the parking problem as well for Leicestershire County Council, so that doesn't go by the by? We do need to have something done about the parking.
Would you be acceptable to add that to it, James, finding out more comments from the highways?
More than happy, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, once again, in terms of the purpose of doing this, we have an application on which the County Council have raised no concerns. And if we're talking about the existing parking problem, then that obviously again isn't a matter for this committee to determine, because the county, if they see fit, can make provision and enforce that.
Yeah, I've been around planning long enough to know that it's up to the committee. They don't have to accept the highways, report and all the rest of it. And clearly that is the view of you as a proposer. So we'll add in concerns about highways too to it, because we're deferring it. We're not making a decision on the planning application. This is just a simple deferment. It's different to actually rejecting it. So if everybody's happy, I'm looking around, can we now have a vote? Those in favour of deferring? Oh, yep, very quickly, Marilyn, very quickly.
Yeah, because when the county council, when the officers came round perhaps to see it, they probably didn't see it on the days when it's so full with the hub and all the other things that's going on there. So we could actually ask them to find out when the time to come, when it's all, when all the parking is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, Marilyn. Yes, we'll do that. Okay, so let's go for the vote. So I've already made the motion, which is for a deferment of this application to a future meeting with more information about the local need and the planning highways issues. Those in favour of deferring this application at this moment, please put their hands up. How many got? That's 4. Is it 4? That's 4. Thank you. Those against? Four against. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, I am abstaining at that stage, but I now have no choice as the chairman but to make a decision because it's now my casting vote. I think that a deferment is not required. I think, therefore, we go forward and we have a choice now, therefore, being the committee have put it this way, of either rejecting this application or voting in favour of it. So I'm looking around the room now. I don't think deferment will do us any good. That's my view as a chair, and therefore I'll be voting against deferment. So that's 5-4, which means we will not defer. I'm now looking around the room saying, please, can we have another proposer for either putting it through? Yes, Lee, Councillor Lee Higgins, thank you.
I'm going to do a proposal just as yet, but yes, in terms of parking, and I think from what the legal officer was saying is the county council highways would have just come back with the advice that they've given. So that's the reason I thought that would fail. I think we've got to look at the policies here, and I asked a question: if this succeeds and gains planning permission, is there a condition we can put on the applicant in relation to working with the immediate neighbours to avoid any potential either antisocial behaviour or building healthier communities? If that's a condition. Just looking at this, the only information that I think we're lacking is we've talked about at this committee about clustering of care homes in a particular area. If the officers can confirm if there's any clustering in the immediate vicinity. Concentration, yeah, that would be fine, yeah.
Okay, 2 questions for Sarah, I believe. Oh, Amy's going to take this.
Just to first touch on the condition, just in terms of the relationship with the neighbours, the management plan does actually cover the complaints procedure, which covers the neighbours. I don't know whether you've had a chance to review that document and review the complaints procedure. As the agent mentioned, that is quite standard across all children's homes, and that management plan is secured by condition 2.
Thank you, Chair. So on that, and what I'm sort of thinking is, because I see the condition and obviously the plan there is, I think the intention is a physical document going to the neighbours, not that they have to go and find this information. That's what I'm sort of thinking of, something that's positive and proactive from the applicant side.
In which case we have to be confident that that condition would meet the statutory tests for a planning condition. Which I'm not completely confident we could cover those tests by a condition like that. It's a matter for consideration amongst members.
Could I just say, obviously, Councillor Higgins, I know we've got the applicant here. I can see him nodding his head. Obviously, anybody running these wants a good relationship. If it doesn't become good, then all hell will break loose, almost certainly. And Ofsted won't be very impressed either. So, but carry on with your questions.
And I did think of that, Amy, as well. The main reason I think of a physical proactive part is there may be individuals or neighbours that aren't IT literate or may have some other impairment where. So I just think that's why something like that. And I do agree with you, Chair. Is I'm sure, obviously, from the organisation's point of view, that they will have these in place. I just think it's good to build working neighbourhoods and communities if we are going to do that.
I am as certain as I can be, but I don't think we can get it in law. That George has indicated to me that he will make as confident as he can be, because he's done many of these. I know that the relationship with the neighbour, and this is a firm that's done it for years, will need to be built. But it's very hard for us to put that in planning terms. But I believe that will be for the benefit of them, because they don't want bad Ofsted reports. They don't want Leicestershire County Council, who've got an excellent record in children's homes at the moment, certainly compared to the city. And we need to just rely on them making certain that happens. Thank you. The second question. Sorry, Amy. What was the second question?
It was what assurances in terms of concentration on this application, because that's I'm not sure
not
about
clustering, concentration. Yeah. Yeah, go on.
Thank you, Chair. So just in terms of clustering, or we would refer to it as concentration as it is in the planning guidance note, there's no strict determination as to how we would assess that concentration. In terms of the planning guidance note, it's influenced the assessment made by the applicant in their planning statement, and it's up to members to determine whether that's an appropriate assessment that's taken place. In a main urban area like Melton Mowbray, I don't know if there is a wider area that could cover that concentration, or a smaller area. It is a case by case basis.
Let's quickly get this through.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure the answer will be no. But there's no others on the street or just the immediate Baldock's Lane. Within a few.
No.
Yeah.
Not that we know of. No.
Ziggy Atherton would know if there was one in the nearby areas. Okay, right. Now, obviously, as your chair, I'm trying to seek guidance here. We've had rejection. We've had deferment. Can we now have, please, another motion that we feel we can go with? Is there anybody willing to propose a motion? Because otherwise we're going to be, you've got two hands up here. I'll put the first hand, Marilyn, was further up. So no, Councillor Brown, if you want to, you put your hand up first. So yes, you did.
I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, Chair. Look, yeah, I'm relatively new to the planning committee, as colleagues, fellow councillors will know. And I've listened carefully to all the arguments that have been deployed here, and particularly from the residents who are here with their objections to the application. But I'm minded of good advice I once received when I was much younger, which is you have to live in the world as it is, not as you would wish it to be. And throughout the debate here tonight, I've not heard a sound and reliable planning argument that gives us grounds for rejecting this application. I've been waiting almost in hope that such an argument will come out, but I haven't heard one, and I'm struggling to formulate one. So on that basis, I'm going to propose that the application be approved.
Okay, and I
Make
presume that,
myself unpopular in doing that.
yes, thank you, thank you. And I assume, councillor Gordon, you're willing to second that? No? Ah. Oh, well, there we go. Could we,
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
the proposal, please? So we've had a proposal for acceptance. Is there a seconder to that? Oh, Lee.
Yeah, and only for the same reasons as Councillor Brown's put, is to make a refusal stick, we have to have a reason.
Yep.
And I can't find a reason
No.
for that. And what the officers, the only other concern I had is if there was a concentration in this area. The parking thing is very, very frustrating. But when a highways authority states all is fine, we know that if it goes to appeal inspectors, it's a very weak argument to say that we were highways consultants when we're not.
Yep.
So that's that. So they were the things I were considering if it was needed to be refused, but we don't have that technical information to refuse it, which and I think, as Councillor Mason says, I think we may have to take this outside of the planning chamber to put more pressure on the county council in regards to need and local need of looked after children.
Absolutely. You'll find this staggering, Councillor Lee Higgins. I agree with you entirely. I have looked with the officers up and down to try and find something that I've thought would stick in planning laws, and I just can't find it. I just can't find it. Anyhow, who hasn't spoken much at the moment, Margaret?
Thank you. With reluctance, I think we really have to agree this. There is nothing in the planning that we can use as a hook to refuse. There's no avenue, and I've sat here very quietly listened to everything, but I'll come back to the same thing. There is nothing here regarding from planning law to substantiate a refusal. Sorry to say, but there isn't.
Okay, no, I understand where you're coming from, and I understand where the proposer's coming from. A reluctant proposal is probably the best way to put it. Marilyn, did you wish to speak again? One more time, Marilyn.
I'm hoping that people have been thinking about it, will change their minds, because I do want to refuse this and propose to refuse it. Because on the basis of the fact that perhaps the county council don't know what the traffic is like when the hub and everything else is all coming together, and the terrible parking. I mean, we just can't deal with that. No. And I think that could be a basis, and that if we can put that forward, that probably they haven't seen that.
I think everybody, I hope everybody around the room, I think Councillor Gordon knows your concerns, and I appreciate their reasonable concerns, but we have a proposal for acceptance, and like everybody in the room, I'm interested to see how this goes. Okay, so unless anybody else wants to speak, we will now vote on the substantive motion, which is to accept the officer's recommendation that the planning application is accepted. Okay, those in favour, please show your hands. Oh no. I can see what's coming. That's 4, isn't it, Lee? Thank you. Those against? Thank you so much, committee. Okay, the chair's vote is here, and it's a casting vote, and it has to be because I abstain normally, but I've now got to the same stage as I've got to before, and my vote is in favour of the application and going forward as it is, because I can find, like the officers and other members on this committee, reluctant as it is, there is nothing in planning law to stop this application going forward. And that's what we have to do, because if an appeal comes ahead, we have to be able to defend it. And I've found nothing in law that can reject it. Thank you very much, members. Okay, so that is the vote over. The planning application has been accepted and it goes through. Members of the public, if you wish to leave now, you can. We've got another item coming up. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman?
Can
Don't
we
you think
wait?
it's a bit disgraceful that we haven't got a policy of our own?
I'd agree entirely, Elaine, and this is where maybe the local plan needs to be revisited, but unfortunately it's going through as we speak. It's too late now, but we need to try and sort something out. Guidance from Cabinet is not enough. It needs to be a law. Yeah, thank you very much, committee, for that. We'll now move on to agenda item 5, which is implementation of the National Scheme of Delegation for Planning Functions. This obviously report is both from Sarah Legg and she can take us through it. Have you got slides? She's got slides too, but obviously just bear in mind this is not something we're voting on. This is an act of Parliament. It's been passed. So this is just for information, and I'm sure Sarah will take us through what's going to happen and what's going to happen with the Planning Committee. Thank you, Sarah. Yep. Yes, of course, it's being broadcast, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just wait for us to just get to the correct slide just to kick us off. Thank you very much. So this report that you have in front of you concerns about a significant national change to the way that planning applications will be allocated between officers and planning committee going forward. So by allocated, I mean in terms of the decision making. I'll try and keep the presentation relatively brief, focus on what's changing, what it will mean for members, communities, and then the work that we as officers need to complete before the 31st of October when things actually change. I'll try and bring out the key points from the report. I understand the report could be considered to be fairly dry, but it is legislation, so by the very nature of it, it is, sadly. And that is item 5 in your agenda packs. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So the key point from the outset is that this is not a proposal from officers, and it isn't something that the committee is actually being asked to choose. Parliament's established that there'll be a national scheme of delegation, which the council must follow from the 31st of October. And those regulations were made around about the 15th of July, so just 2 or 3 weeks ago now, and come into force on the 31st of October. So the details up there on that slide basically give you a very, very brief overview of it. So it is a single national framework just for England. So Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland are not included. And it basically tells us in that legislation what applications must be decided by officers, and I've underlined must because there is no discretion in that matter. And then which applications may be considered by committee, and I'll go into the details of that a little further on coming slides. So like I say, it is a legal requirement. It's not a local policy choice or even a national policy choice. It is a change in the law. So this session today is about your awareness, starting to get that preparation in place for it. And like I said, when we kick this off, we're not deciding on whether to adopt it. It is being put upon us from that date in October. So there's going to be necessary constitutional amendments that will follow, and that will have to go through the council's governance arrangements. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So you've got a lot more detail in your reports about these 2 different schedules that are forming part of the legislation. So there's 2 schedules and 2 different routes for decision making, as it says up there. So the types of applications will either fall into Schedule 1 or Schedule 2. Schedule 1 is things like householder applications, minor residential, which is up to 9 dwellings, up to and including 9 dwellings, prior approvals, so that could be things like Class Q applications, so agricultural to residentials, other agricultural approvals, and various other things that are under prior approvals. Can you not? I do apologise. Is that any better? Marvellous. So lawful development certificates are also part of that Schedule 1, non-material amendments to applications, and things like biodiversity gain plans, which have come from the biodiversity net gain legislation. That's not a comprehensive list. That's giving you an idea of the types of applications. There's a more comprehensive list in your report pack. Schedule 2 applications are also being referred to, and as I put it in inverted commas, gateway applications. And they're gateway applications because it's basically a decision that needs to be made as to whether it proceeds to planning committee or not. And there is a list of the types of applications that fall into that. So major planning applications, so that 10 or more dwellings, listed building consents, large reserve matters applications, Section 73 applications, which are variation of conditions, so things that you're used to seeing with VAC on the end as the suffix. Advertisement consents and things like protected trees fall into Schedule 2. So the default for a Schedule 2 application is that it is an officer decision, is the default, unless the gateway is passed. So that gateway is a consideration of the statutory tests, which is the social, the economic and the environmental impacts of the development, material considerations, etc. And I'll move on to that just in a little bit more detail on the next slide. But it's really important to understand that one of the major changes here is that objections, so number of objections, local interest or other representations, or a member request cannot move a Schedule 1 application to committee. So most importantly, out of that list, I would suggest it's things like householder applications, minor residentials and commercials that sometimes, that you'll have seen in past committees, trigger to come to the planning committee because it hits a threshold that's currently in our scheme of delegation. They no longer can come to committee after the 31st of October. It's not a choice, it is a no. If I finish and then we'll do questions after, if that's okay, Siggy. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So this slide, as you can see, I have plagiarised with pride from the Planning Advisory Service in terms of this gateway test. So this is where essentially there's a discussion as to whether these applications meet this statutory criteria, and I'm hoping it's big enough on your screen. Not quite, is it? I'll read it out. So the statutory criteria is, does the application raise one or more issues of economic, social or environmental significance to the local area, or one or more significant planning matters having regard to the development plan and any other material considerations. So on the right hand side of the screen there's just those typical applications that you'd find in that Schedule 2. Now, the way that gateway test will operate, and we still need to design this up, but so this is just what's coming out of legislation at the moment, is there's a nominated officer, which is the Chief Planning Officer, and a nominated member, most likely the chair of planning committee, basically go through those applications in some way, shape or form or another, assess it against that statutory criteria and make a decision. Now, the challenge to that is that it's the nominated officer who has the final say rather than it being the chair of planning. And if that's the case, the application must be determined by officers. And again, there isn't an ability to call that into planning committee. So ultimately, the test is not whether an application is controversial or unpopular. It's a legal question of whether the application raises issues of significance or significant planning matters. The representations remain really important in that matter, but the number of representations is not in itself the gateway as it currently is. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I've just sort of pulled together here what this might mean for members and communities going forward, because it's obviously a fairly significant change to how things operate. So we're very clear still that engagement very much matters. It's the route to determination that changes. So just to be clear, those local call-in arrangements can't override that national scheme of delegation. Objection thresholds can't automatically trigger to committee. Some applications that are currently expected at committee will fall to be decided by officers. And we will probably find going forward that committee agendas are likely to be a little more focused. I know Councillor Evans has gone through about the last year's worth of agendas and pulled some figures out of there, which he can probably fill you in when I finish the presentation. But what doesn't change, really importantly, is members, parish councils and residents can still comment on planning applications, and those comments are very much welcomed. And all material planning considerations must still be assessed in the determination of applications. That local knowledge remains really valuable to the determination of planning applications, and the committee retains an important role on those applications where that statutory test has been met. So the practical message to come out of it for members and for the community, if there's anybody watching out there, is early engagement matters, focus on the material planning considerations and really get under the issue of why is it significant, because if it's a Schedule 2 application, that's the test that we will need to go through to decide whether something gets called into committee or not. And I think it's just important to note here that a delegated decision is not a less rigorous decision. Most of the applications that come into the local authority are determined under delegated powers, and there's only a small selection that does actually come to committee at the moment. The application, when it's considered under delegated powers, still has to be considered against the development plan and all relevant material considerations. It is just a change to who makes that final decision. So this is the final slide. I said I'd try and keep it brief. So this is essentially a kind of list of what we need to do as officers to get ready for the 31st of October, working with the Chair and Vice Chair. So there needs to be an update to the Constitution. There needs to be a revision of the planning scheme of delegation. We need to identify who the nominated member and officer is, including substitutes. So if an officer's away or the chair's away. Design that gateway in the triage process, so that process around Schedule 2 applications and where we trigger something to come to committee or not. Those decisions have to be recorded and published, so we need to think about how we're going to be doing that, because that needs to be open and transparent, and that is something that is a requirement. We obviously need to carry on briefing members, and this forms part of that, and we're planning on doing a further briefing, obviously, before this comes into place, and further training for the planning committee before those new arrangements begin, so you can thoroughly get under the skin of that as well. So today's recommendation is that the planning committee is asked to note that legal change, note its implications, and note that those constitutional amendments will follow through full council, currently programmed to be in September's council, I think it is. So there's a fair bit of work to do between now and then. And I'm obviously more than happy to take any questions as we move forward from here.
Okay. Oh, sorry, hold on a second.
I just wanted to add that there is an all-member briefing in members' calendars for the 21st of October that covers the National Scheme of Delegation as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So my question is, what happens when the application is from a member or an officer? Because in the past, those applications automatically came down to the committee, and I didn't see any of that on the board.
Yes, you're absolutely correct, Councillor Atherton. That is there. It is in the statute. Like I said, I've pulled out some key points into those slides there. Yeah.
Yes, obviously. Are there any transitional arrangements? We have in the pipeline applications. Do those fall away, those applications, in committee terms at the 31st of October? So anything that's left hanging out on the 31st of October, they are bitten by the new arrangements. Is that correct?
There we go. Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Mason. So it's the new regulations come into force on the 31st of October. and it doesn't apply to applications that have only been submitted after that date. It applies to all decision making from that date. So if there's an application currently sitting on our books that isn't ready to be determined before the 31st of October, it will fall under either a Schedule 1 or a Schedule 2 after that date. So no, to answer your question, there aren't any transitional arrangements in the law.
So just to confirm, sorry, Chair, so just to confirm, any member call-in that's been called in now, if it's not heard by the 31st of October, then it falls away. That's the detail.
I believe so. I haven't read anything to the contrary in that legislation.
Yeah, because I'm aware that there are transitional arrangements for schemes, for applications, that they are being prepared on one. If they are being prepared on the current basis, there is some grace period up until the new year, whereby they can still proceed on that basis. There's some transitional arrangements.
Could I ask where you've got that from, Councillor Mason?
All my information comes from the net.
I haven't come across any transitional arrangements, but if you do have that information, that would be very helpful. Thank you, Councillor Mason.
Councillor Mason, is there anybody else? Yes, Councillor. Yep, go on then. Oh, well, we'll try one at a go on then.
Oh, right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, like tonight, when there was like a grey area, I'm sure that Sarah, you would make sure that if there's a change of constitution, which there's got to be, that everything that you want in it will be in it, so that it makes it quite clear to you. Is that right?
So the change to the Constitution is set out in law as to what is a Schedule 1 and what is a Schedule 2 application. I have no choice in that matter. We have no choice in that matter. Schedule 2.
So could I just ask quickly,
Hmm.
Sarah, this one that we had tonight, change of use, is that Schedule 2?
I think it would fall under Schedule 2, which is an application for planning permission that is not householder, minor commercial or minor residential.
Yeah.
Will it alter then something, the local plan? Are we?
No, it doesn't alter the local
No.
plan. That's the local development plan.
Could I just ask, will it have an impact on what's happening, which is the local plan update? There's nothing in there that will be affected. Nope. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, obviously, I think I made my opinion of this clear in the briefing the other night, in the fact that when you match it in with the debacle of local government reorganisation, it just moves even further away any local knowledge into this. But I understand from what you said that basically we've got no option to object to this. It's going to happen, all the rest of it. But we do have options on how we treat it as a council. And the point I made in the briefing the other night, which is to actually be able to scrutinise those decisions that we are, well, the chair and the officer will be able to make sure that there is consistency within there, and that the local views are being taken, etc. So where will that happen? Will that happen before it goes to full council for the changes? How do we create those policies to understand that how that scrutiny is done? Because you could sort of say, is it the scrutiny committee, or is it this committee becomes the scrutiny of the decisions, and that there is a function? So it's just basically to put that question in there, because I think we do have some flexibility on how we actually monitor and process.
Absolutely, quite right. And this is already, me and Sarah and Lydia have already discussed this. My view as your chair is that we will still need to be open and transparent on all these decisions, and that will be regular meetings of the planning committee to openly examine what's going on, comment on them, see if there's, see if we think there's issues that are wrong or right. At the end of the day, as Sarah told me once briefly just recently, you do realise it's only on my decision initially that this will come forward, because it's the word "and" is used on Schedule 2. So Schedule 2, Sarah will look at it. If she feels it doesn't need to come to the committee, it doesn't matter what I say, arguably. The government have decided that the unelected officers, in my opinion, and this is not being rude to them, but it's the unelected officers could decide to just not bring it to this committee. Or the only way it can come to this committee is if I, or the elected chair, if I'm the nominated person for it, and the elected officer agree for it to come to committee. So that's the rule according to the statutes that's gone through.
But that's what I mean about the scrutiny. It's not just the scrutiny of, say, your decision as the chair, but it's the scrutiny of the officers. And I would like to also add a little bit, and please take this with no disrespect whatsoever, the fact that any outstanding applications, whether they've been deferred or whether for whatever reason they haven't got a decision made before the 31st of October, that all the reasons for why that hasn't made it by the 31st of October is decided upon. I mean, I'm thinking that I've got at least 3 applications myself, which I've called in, which are not going to make it by that date, I would imagine, because and so we need to actually check that there is nothing stopping those, or there is. And I'm not making any accusation. I'm just sort of saying that we need to make sure that there is nothing delaying any of those.
No,
because that changes an awful lot.
There's a lot of questions that are going on here, and thank you for those. Obviously, we are in a situation roughly where about 100 of the cases we've got applications are live, and there are 300 which are in abeyance. Let's probably put the best words on it, and it does that in itself creates a conundrum for us as a council, because obviously there are 300 applicants who need to be dealt with in some way before arguably October, but we'll just have to work through that as well as we can, because this is, as Sarah has indicated, a massive change from how the planning since 1972 has happened in this council. It's the only word I can use, massive. It's massive. My gut feeling is we'll meet as a committee, but I suspect it will be once every 2 to 3 months at best, because there will not be the cases that there were coming here. You know, the extension on a house that a neighbour object to, or many object to, will, for instance, not be coming here. And even 8 or 9 new houses will not be coming here unless, because there will be Schedule 1. That's a significant change to the way we as a committee have worked. And I'm still trying, as your chair, to get my head around that, because it is a significant change. It's not, and what we've got to do, obviously, as an authority, is not only absorb that ourselves, but make a PR exercise of getting it out to the public, because they need, and the parish councils need to understand that the process will completely change. Like this meeting tonight, there are 20-odd objections. And that is important and will be, but if it was a Schedule 1, then that's it up to the officer to look at it. It's a complete different, but we need to, we have discussed, me and Lydia have already discussed this, how much hard work we've got to do to make certain the parish councils in particular, but also the residents, understand this significant change, because they will not understand it to start with. And I don't think it's been very well advertised at all at the moment. But that's where we are.
Patiently, Chair.
Okay.
You know, dwelling on your words of wisdom, which were very helpful. I've got three things I just wanted to raise. And the first of them actually is, and it's in 4.9 and the subsequent paragraphs of the report on the implications for members and ward councillors, etc. And it does say there very clearly, it remains very important that there's still engagement in the planning process. It's just that we can't actually come to committee, and objectors can't come to committee and talk to people. And it's that talking bit, because at the moment, what's implied here is if you want to raise an issue about an application, then just write in and submit your comments, and that will be part of the information looked at by the planning officer who's determining it. And I think whilst we've got to implement the new scheme of delegation, we have scope within that to decide what our working practices will be. And I think one of the things we should be considering under that is the opportunity to talk to people, not to chat GBT, to an actual person. Because I think sometimes, you know, and no disrespect to the officers, a new planning officer who's just arrived here from Burnley may not understand Thorpe Sackville as well as the local councillor, and a conversation sometimes will help in making better decisions. So I think we should be looking at the scope for that. I know it's not going to be possible for every objector to have a personal conversation with the officer. Lydia's just nodded her head. Maybe every objector should have a conversation with the officer, but certainly local ward members to have that opportunity rather than just say, well, submit your written comments and that's as far as you can get. So I'd like that to be looked at as part of the consideration. I've got two other things I want to raise, sorry. You want to jump in on that straight away, and I can come back to the other 2 points after that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just wanted to remind members that we started around about 6 weeks ago now, I think it was, these sessions that we called Spark. Don't ask me to remember exactly what Spark stands for. Planning, advice, knowledge, something like that. But essentially, it is a 4-hour session every Thursday that you can pop into the office without booking an appointment. Planning officers will be available to talk to you. It's between 10 and 2 upstairs on the first floor here, with a more focused session on the first Thursday of every month, where if you email in or message in beforehand with the details of exactly which applications it is you want to talk about, we will do our best to make sure the relevant officer is there at that session for you. So I would advise that you really make the best use of that if at all possible, because we are staffing that for you to have that as a drop-in session. Thank you.
And Carlos, I very much appreciate that. I've not had to use it yet, and that's right and proper. But I still return to, in looking at the new arrangements, I think it's always helpful if we set out that there is a particular route that ward members can take to engage over particular applications. So
absolutely,
as we're working through the process. But
thank you. I agree with you entirely, because obviously, in a way, some people would say you're taking away from councillors here. I think the opposite is true. We now have a much more important role to make certain that the officers are aware of the public's concerns and discuss it with them, you know, as often as we can. Obviously, they've got a job to do with, and it may have to be, you know, appointments only and stuff like that. But we needed to do a job to get this working efficiently, quickly. Thank you. But carry on with the question now. It's gone.
And interest applications. Now, again, we have to comply with the new regulations, but reading what's in section 4.5 and the subsequent paragraphs, it seems to me we have scope to set down what we expect to be the norm with own interest applications. I mean, personally, I have some concerns regarding whether it's elected members or members of staff, for their own good and protection, that we should actually agree what our normal approach to these should be. And it seems to me, unless I'm misreading the regulation, we have some scope to introduce our own, if you like, standard around that. So I think that needs to be looked at. And then the third thing, and I'm reluctant to raise this for reasons that will perhaps be obvious, It's the 6th of August today, and the new regulations come in on the 31st of October. And part of the work to be undertaken is to review and change our constitution. The reason I'm reluctant to raise that is I'm on the Constitution Review Group, as are my colleagues on my left and right. But clearly it's important that we've actually brought in constitutional changes. So it's really to ask the question, are we already starting to look at that? And we're going to need to move quite quickly, bearing in mind how long it's taken us to deal with some constitution review issues over the last 3 years.
As you'd expect, I'll hand over to Clive.
No, I agree. I mean, as you may see from the paper, the regulations are actually laid in on the 15th of July, so it's been quite a short turnaround, and I think it's ambitious, but we are stuck with it. But it's quite ambitious to expect all authorities to have gone through that process in a relatively short space of time. Obviously, this was one of the first member meetings and probably the most important member meeting at which these should be raised, because regardless of the fact that the council will ultimately make the decision, obviously it has its biggest impact here. So having done that, there's two potential options. Now, I know the normal process is for the Constitution Review Working Group to have an input in these sorts of matters, but there is nothing in our constitution or otherwise that stops this committee giving their views in relation to this, and I think it would be well, I'll just put it another way. I think that would be the most appropriate thing to do, because you've got the experience, and I know there's several members here who are also on the Constitution Review Working Group, but I think you've got the experience. You've heard these applications however many times. To have that input would probably bring out the best possible proposition to council. Obviously council will be the ultimate decision-making body, but the more we can refine any proposal to them, the better. And so it's just a question, I suppose, of how we do that. And whilst we may want to consider it again at our next meeting, which is 4th of September, and that will be our last chance in terms of the timetable we have to follow, whether anything as a sort of workshop type or informal session would be appropriate to get those views, because we can't sit here. Theoretically you can, but to sit here as a committee and debate it and try to come up with those proposals is probably not the most constructive approach, not on the basis that it doesn't mean people in a good have a good input. It's just that it's a more of a discussive type approach, and to develop something and test things and how they might work in practice. So I think it's although we haven't put in an express recommendation in the report around that point, I think it's important for members now to think about how they could perhaps be engaged in that.
Yeah, I'm right in thinking, Clive, there are obviously parts that we can't change, whatever we want, but there are parts that are open to interpretation, like as has been pointed out by Councillor Brown, the own interest applications a bit more.
Yeah, and there's the regs are very clear about that. We have to make arrangements, and as with all this, it will be for full council to make that decision. But there's already some legislation around that. Just for example, you couldn't make you couldn't consider an own interest application in private session, just for example, and that's stated in law. So there's various things around that, and obviously what we want to do is make sure that type of thing where we do have discretion is looked at in the context of our position as a council and the current law and these new regulations. So yeah, those bits, that is the stuff we do have some flexibility with. So yeah.
Okay, obviously I'm coming to you, Margaret. We have some urgency, and obviously I'll meet quickly with Sarah, Lydia, and obviously yourself, Clive, to try and figure out when and how we can push this forward and bring to this committee probably a paper of some description which will give us the options and give us a chance to discuss it in an open forum
as to how we take this forward, because this planning committee has obviously got, as Clive has indicated, it's got the skill set, and it should be the forum that looks through everything, will bring a skeleton of something to you, and then we'll try and hopefully get something in concrete for the full council, because obviously this has to go to full council at the end in September. So we've got a very limited short period to do it. So there'll obviously have to be some kind of meeting between now and September of this committee to try and make certain we can present to full council a recommendation of how this Act of Parliament is invoked in Melton Borough Council. So I'll take upon that to do that, and then I'll now hand over to Margaret, who had her hand up and is waiting patiently.
Thank you. And my colleague sitting next to me has taken the points because I've got all my scribbled notes. Never mind. I know you won't. No, you're all right. But I do think this points to very sort of closer working between members and officers, to be honest. And I think this can only be a good thing. There might need to be more capacity than just 4 hours once a week. I think there probably is going to have to be more capacity than that.
Yeah.
So it will lead to closer working. So therefore, officers will need to be more available. I'm sorry, guys, but this is a huge thing that we're dealing with. And I totally agree with the fact that we need to address the own interest applications.
Yeah.
What we don't want is to leave anybody vulnerable within this organisation. So if we address the issue first time round, it's done. There's no embarrassment on anybody's part.
Yep.
So I think I'm very keen for the planning committee to recommend this to
full council. Yeah,
not
that's what's got to happen, and I need it. Yeah, I need it to be unanimous from members here. Yeah,
important that the planning committee recommend the alterations.
It needs to be unanimous. We need to all have a chance to have our say in it, because you're all experienced. You all know what you're talking about, and that's the way we'll do it. We'll organise probably another meeting, because we don't want this to be part of another application or anything like that. Another meeting where we can spend hopefully as long as necessary to actually thrash it out. But obviously what I need to do as your chair with the vice chair and officers is put something together, probably distribute it before the meeting so you can bring your comments to it, and then have the meeting to just iron out what we're putting to full council. So you have my assurance that will happen. Did you want to come back, Margaret? Or?
When you're arranging the meeting, can we sort of gauge the availability of certain, because it's obviously holiday time now, isn't it?
Yeah, I know.
If we can gauge that availability, you've got more input from more people.
We will do. Thank you, Margaret. And now over to Councillor Lee Higgins.
Yeah, so I'm going to just raise, I'm not going to talk about any particular applications that have happened. So we've had some instances where small parcels of land have then been refused against officer recommendation, and then that decision has been upheld at appeal. And I think, like Alan was saying, is I think some of the scrutiny of that is our officers interpreting how we feel the local plan was intended, or the direction the local plan stated. Because obviously on one small parcel piece of land, and you say that was passed for housing, then the next parcel of land somewhere else, that then in theory should also go, and then you can have a bit of a whole carte blanche with that, where I think the ward members put a good reason of why that should have been refused. That all said, then on the positive side, especially in like rural areas as well, or you've got particular areas in and around Melton where some kind of regeneration can happen in an area. So there's one area in Thorpe Section, I won't mention the site, I have spoken to Lydia on it, that an application may come in. Some of it will be economically regenerative. The community want it to happen, or I think they'll want it to happen because they've expressed that before. It will then come into conflict with some major policies. So because all of it's trying to do something positive, but equally I do know that there'll be some planning policies it runs against. And I think, like Margaret was saying, we've got to work together with the officer, because on opportunities, one-off opportunities to get development, positive development, even though it's a fine balance, because it will run into some policies that normally we would say no to, but because of that one-off opportunity to develop either, you know, where buildings are falling into dilapidation and all the other stuff, where, or listed buildings where we could potentially save them, it does need that stronger local identity, local knowledge. And if and the other thing where I think ward councillors do really well on is when they work with an applicant, they can, and Elaine says this a lot, they can make the application better for the community. Just that little nuance that you do to get either additional affordable housing on a voluntary basis or a little bit more from the developer. I remember one, I think it was in the Bottisford ward, where Davidson's, from memory, were putting extra stuff into the community because of the work by the ward member. It wasn't really policy, it wasn't a planning judgment, but it was work on the ward member. Now, if this technocratic diktat from Parliament and Whitehall is to just say, well, this is how it all's going to be, then what's the point of the local representation? And I know we make the local plan, but we've got to make sure our communities do benefit in those positive cases on there. And, and again, going back to Alan's point, if we can work on that, how are we working together and how are we scrutinising decisions? I think members of the public will understand where we are on it.
Yeah. We've had a lot of work on this already, and I think even Lydia and Sarah would agree. The one thing we've said as a team, and I am a member, councillor, chair, and these are officers, we need to work together like this now from now on, especially with the new legislation, because we can't have a situation where councillors feel disenfranchised from the whole situation, feel that the officers aren't listening. We need more communication, because communication will build trust between us as committee members and the officers. That can work and will work, and I will put everything I can into it. You have my assurance as your chair to try and make certain that you're listened to. The officers talk to me, and we will work through everything, because you are, to me, important, because you know what's going on in your areas. You've got the skill set, and obviously the ward members also have got the skill set. We need to. This is going to put more onus on us as committee members to listen and work with the officers from now on. And yes, I agree with Margaret. I have concerns about the accessibility. I know well, Lee probably knows also how much the situation where we couldn't even talk to them went down with the parish councils. We've got to do a bit of repair there to actually get that trust back in the situation, the communication with the parish councils. I want to talk to the parish councils too and make them aware that we want going forward to be much closer to them, listen to them and make them feel that they're, because especially as it goes forward to the LGR reform, the parish council will be, most of us won't be here, and it will just be one, there'll probably be about one member for the Vale of Belvoir, for instance, one councillor for the Vale of Belvoir. A lot of work to do. So we've got to prepare the steps for this happening. It's a big, Alan, you wanted to come in, and I need to not talk so much.
No comment. No, no. The only thing, the part of that communication, I think, which is got to be, I don't know how you're going to square this wheel. The fact that most of the basis of this was supposedly on speeding up the planning process, and as has already been stated, I think we see less than 1% of all the applications. So how avoiding this process, my words, speeds up the planning process, and I think that's typified by the 616 people, I think it was, that actually responded to this well, and change, and it was split 50-50 down the middle, and the officers and the developers all thought it was a great idea, and anybody in an elected position thought it was a poor idea. And I think that's part of the communication that's got to be done extremely well, not just for the councillors, for every resident that's grown up with this and felt that if the community objected, they had a right to change that.
And absolutely agree. And I'll let Councillor Mason have done enough talking. So, Councillor Mason,
Could I have a copy of the slides, please?
we'll circulate it to all committee members, and we'll try and, as I say, obviously not here, but we'll try and get a timetable for putting what we're going to put to the full council, a skeleton that you can look at as soon as possible. Obviously, most of it will be just the regulations because we can't touch them, but where there is some latitude, we will point that out to you, and then at the meeting we can discuss that. Clive, you wanted to come in.
Sorry, two things, Chair. One is just mindful of time, and obviously if you want to extend, you can extend, but I was just pointing that out. Second thing is, obviously I agree fully with the idea of getting something in the diary as soon as we can. If I can just want to make a suggestion about the approach, we've got obviously regulations that say we've got to do certain things, but those steps, like appointing the officers and the member who's going to be the ones who make the decisions, things about local, the own interest applications, things like that, we've got to do in a particular way. But what underpins these changes is what members have been saying. It's about how we work, the committee continues to work, and the wider membership of the council continues to work with this, because it will be a change. Now, my initial thought on that is that the bits where we have to make changes to comply with the law, that's a recommendation to council. Where it's about the arrangements for consulting with members, which are not regulated by a statute, I think we should be wary of proposing something that is so prescriptive that it stops us having a flexible approach. So that, because we could come up with what we think is a great idea, and on the by the end of the first week in November, we could realise it's just not going to work, and then you've got to go back to council to change the constitution. Yep. So I think it's perhaps the proposal to council should explain that there is this this sort of behind the scenes approach, whatever we collectively determine it should be, but to note the need for it to be fluid and to be developed as time goes on. So that it does underpin this process properly, and doesn't just become another bureaucratic arrangement, because we've got some things being imposed on us now, and where members and officers can work together constructively, they may change. At particular times you may want to adopt different approaches for different matters. So I think we should make sure we have that flexibility, and don't get it enshrined in the constitution.
Well, we can obviously, Clive, we are very close to the time, without being prescriptive here, that can be debated in the meeting we're about to arrange. So if you could, obviously it's August, we all know people, if it would be helpful if we could, to Sarah probably and myself, if you could give us your timetable in August, early September, then that would be helpful, because I know some of you will be away on holiday, hopefully, and all the rest of it. If you could give us your availability, because I know this is a difficult time, but let's just work through this as well as we can. But what being at the meeting would be helpful, that you'll also have a chance to comment. Therefore, we've noted this, that's all we can do. I'm moving on to urgent business, and if anybody thinks I'm going to have urgent business at this point in time, they're wrong. So I am now closing the meeting formally at 8:56. Thank you very much for your attendance.